Francis Ngannou simply does not understand what we're doing here. However, he keeps on getting it right. Do you ever see guys like this? Like, I love the Nick and Nate Diaz model because there was a period of time where unintentionally they were the best marketing arm the UFC had. Like when Nick did not show up to the press conference opposite George St. Pierre, he had no intention that the empty chair, the image, Dana up there calling Caesar. Like, Nick had no idea that was going to be one of the most compelling moments in press conference history. Dana did not understand. He was going to cancel the fight. Dana was not joking about that. When he very openly said, if I can't trust you to come to a press conference, how can I trust you to come to a fight? Dana was very genuinely worried. And the numbers and the interest, Sports Center picking it up, Lebitard picking him up, Jim Rome doing an entire segment on it, right? It was one of these unintentional things. So when a guy gets it right, how do you tell him he's wrong? Right? It's civil disobedience at its finest. Somebody breaks the law, but they break the law for the better good. It's very interesting. So I'm watching Francis, and when I tell you Francis doesn't know what's going on here, a lot of the greats don't. Like, that isn't an insult. It's kind of hard to be very enveloped in something and to know the other side. Here, just work that in reverse, okay? So, a fighter good enough to go and become the champion, do you think he's going to go to the business side? No. But work it in reverse. A promoter good enough to sell out arenas, do you believe he could enter and win the championship? I mean, right? Do you see where it's not an insult to Francis, but it is one of these amazing things? And Francis right now is still trying to pursue boxing. Now, there isn't anyone that wants to see Francis in boxing, but that doesn't mean Francis can't successfully pursue boxing. There was not a big group of people that wanted to watch him fight Tyson Fury, which turned into the greatest sporting event I have ever personally witnessed. And the reason I share that, like, people didn't want to see that was a massive loss. Anthony Joshua did not sell out, didn't even come close to selling out. It was a massive loss. So the idea that Francis would want to go back, if we were to look at from the general standard, is this sustainable and will it work? Is there a night of business here? And we could come to a very obvious conclusion of no, that does not disqualify the idea from coming to fruition. It's a unique position. Now, the reason I say that is Francis has called out Deontay Wilder. And he had a couple of people that he wanted to fight. He mentioned Usyk's name, and he mentioned Tyson Fury's name. And I think there was an importance to that. Because the fight that he's likely to get between those is Wilder. Wilder was the fight to make in the first place. Like, knowing what we know now, seeing how Wilder looked in his last fight, knowing what happened in Francis' last fight, I get all of life works that way, right? When you know what you know now. But it was very clearly, like, that story would be so wildly different. I think Francis would have beaten him. Would have beaten Wilder. I think that would have been a huge surprise. I think that would have got Francis right back in the talks of Tyson Fury and something that people could really look forward to, in which case the Fury-Francis rematch would have been a very different day of business. All right. So here's the miss. And Francis broke this down. And Francis said, when he was calling out Wilder, we need to do it in boxing. Because of the two styles, boxing is the only one where each of us could win. The outcome is unknown. If we were to do it in MMA, only one of us could win, and the outcome is known. And that, to me, is interesting. Based on what? Based on what? What is it about the MMA rules that favor Francis? Or that meaningfully favor Francis? What in Francis's MMA career, what tool? What one tool has he used that you believe a great athlete like, say, Wilder could not learn in 15 minutes? And you might have an answer. Like there is something about some strikers where they just can't do the basic defenses. And there's something to some strikers where they can. Like, by example, I would put Francis in that category. You listen to Francis' interviews, his dream was to be a boxer. And when he got over to MMA, he boxed, but he had really good hips. Even on the days that by MMA standards he was easy to take down, he was not easy to take down. By MMA standards compared to Stipe, for example. But he just was a natural. He just was a natural with the hips. He was a natural of staying up. And I've seen guys like that. I've seen guys where on day one, they have no idea that they have that skill, but they do. I'll watch them in the room and go, my goodness, he's really hard to take down. Even though he gets taken down, but the effort that he made the other guy use, wow, for day one with no experience. And I'm just sharing with you, like, I think that's Deontay's big miss here. Deontay could do a level of business with Francis. Now, you're going to lose. And I don't mean the competition. I mean, whoever puts that on is going to lose money. That is a much better and a much more interesting fight than the two previous fights that Francis has had, and they lost money. I mean, it's not like a debate whether it would lose. It would lose. But not necessarily if you did it in MMA. Like, that just got a whole lot more interesting. There is not a boxing match that Deontay can get $2 million for. That will not happen again in this lifetime. Whoever fights Francis next gets $2 million. Like, that was just part of the negotiation. Now, I'm not saying just because he can get it that it makes sense to do. You're going to have to talk to the PFL. But what I am saying is Francis brought up an interesting point. And the point was, if we go to boxing, do you, the public, believe that we can both win? If we come to MMA, which we won't do because you, the public, don't believe each of us could win, you know it would be me. Is he right about that? Is he right about that? What part of it do you believe he's got down? And I do think that's an interesting concept. I'll tell you one thing that makes wrestling hard, to the point that I know a lot of guys whose wrestling careers came to an end. But knee surgery. I know a number of guys, especially on the elite level, that switched from freestyle to Greco-Roman, where you're not allowed to attack the legs because they had a knee surgery. So you've got a non-existent wrestling base with Francis to begin with, and now you have a knee surgery, and you have 2 years of focus, one on getting that knee better and one just in boxing. Like, what part of the MMA would be sharp? And this is not an attempt to put Francis down. I'm just asking, since Francis did this, since Francis went over to boxing where he had absolutely no chance, oh, by the way, a lot of us thought he won and should have been the world champion. Is that harder to believe and accept than a real good athlete, which Deontay clearly is, a real good athlete, which Joshua clearly is? Now, Joshua's got big multi-million-dollar days ahead of him in boxing. He's not coming over. But Deontay, let's look at him specifically. If you could choose which sport you were going to watch Francis and Deontay compete in. I know you're not dying to see either, but that's not what I'm asking you. If you could choose which sport they did compete in, which would it be? And do you agree with Francis? When you think of Deontay versus Francis in MMA, is Francis right? Does he have the skill set and does he have the abilities within MMA where you don't believe you would see a contest?